Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts of the new Greg's Bounty update in Dungeon Quest. Now originally I wasn't going to make a video on this, but since this is an update and not really an event, or at least I don't think it's an event, I figured why not just give you guys my opinion on it. So as per usual with every recent Dungeon Quest update, this is a very controversial one between the old and new players. And I'm just gonna jump straight into it. So if you guys like this video, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more future Dungeon Quest or Animal Crossing content. So let's get right into it. So for everyone who doesn't know what this update brings, there is a new boss called Greg who has a chance to randomly spawn when you kill a minion stage in dungeons. When you kill him, you get loot from your latest dungeon, and you also get a crafting material, which you can use to craft a new legendary weapon for whatever level you are on. Now, these weapons are actually really strong for whatever level they're supposed to be unlockable on, and honestly, in my opinion, they should be considered ultimate weapons because, for an example, on the 4 tiers of the weapons, you have the level 81, a level 121, a level 161, and one for level 200. However, these are basically like 5 to 10 levels higher than what you would normally see at those level ranges. Like for an example, everyone seems to be talking about the Champion's Destiny, which is the highest tier weapon you can make. And everyone is really wants to get this weapon because this is way better than the Yokai Peak legendaries, as the average power is around 400 million, which is a full 720 million or 72 million higher than the max legendary, and this can make a huge difference in gameplay. Now as of me recording this parts, there is only the warrior version available, but there will be a mage version coming in the present days. And I'm not gonna call out Voldex on this, but I feel like they're going to reduce the power on it. So definitely get some materials up while you can. Another thing this update brings is profiles. So you can start a new profile and start from scratch there rather than just making a whole bunch of accounts, which I think is a nice quality of life change, although I don't really like that you have to spend Robux to have more than one profile, and I'm not sure if you can trade items between profiles, but I still like that addition nonetheless. I do like the addition that if you level up in alts that you do get boosts for the other accounts. But I'm just curious of what people would think of this, because there is a few problems with people who don't have alts compared to people who do have them. So I'm not sure how the balancing is going to work on that, but we'll have to see what the days come. Okay, so what do I think of this update as a whole? Well, just like the Easter events, there's a lot of pros and cons to everything that was added to this update. And amongst all the older players, it's the same old opinions that everyone has had, where everyone just thinks this update is pretty bad. And let's first break this down, starting with the boss. Now, one of the positives I'm going to give is us endgame players now have something to grind for. Now, this isn't really super interesting as a new dungeon, admittedly, but it's still something for us end players to get, because this weapon at the highest tier is better than the legendaries, so at least there's some incentive to grind. Now, of course, this would have been a lot better if we just had a new dungeon or a way harder boss to fight like the Odin Reincarnation was. But at least they were trying something. Another positive with this update is, of course, the profiles. I think that's a good addition. I feel like they could have added maybe an extra character and maybe removed the ability to buy profiles instead of just getting only one for free. But it's a nice addition nonetheless. Now, as for the negatives, there's actually quite a lot for me to cover, and I'm gonna get started with the boss. So, Greg, he has a 1 in 3 chance to spawn in a dungeon whenever you're playing them. If you didn't buy the Greg's Bounty, then yeah, he has a chance to spawn, and until you get him to spawn or go through the dungeon, you won't know which is which. So when you defeat Greg, you will get loot from your highest dungeon, which it doesn't sound so bad, and you also get crafting materials, and you can use these crafting materials to get the legendary weapons from the crafting. However, the various problems with these crafting materials and the way you grind them is how much materials you need to get and the chance for Greg to spawn in a dungeon. So what do I mean by this? Well, first off, Greg is completely RNG whether you find him or not. And if you buy the bounty, it guarantees him spawning and it also doubles the loot. The obvious problem with this is it makes Greg basically pay to win to get. The Greg's Bounty is also quite expensive. It's around 240 Robux per round. And I have heard it is larger on some dungeons, but I don't really know my logic behind that. However, the Greg's Bounty makes this whole thing just pay to win because you can guarantee a Greg spawn and remove the RNG aspect of just finding him. Now, from one day of playing, I only bought the Greg's Bounty once because I didn't want to spend thousands of Robux just to get one item. However, the problem with that is Voldex has stated in a testing document that you can drop more than one crafting material. However, I think this is actually false or just bugged, because in every single round in my day 1 attempt of getting the weapons, I've only dropped 1 material per drop, and only one person I was playing with dropped 2. So I don't really know what's up with the chances, because Voldex has stated there's a 75% chance to get 1 material, a 25% chance to get 2 materials, and around a legendary chance, which is around 0.5%, to get 3 items. However, nobody has reported that they've gotten 2 or 3 items, other than that one person I was playing with. So I do think the chances need to be looked at, because if it's actually going to give 1 only, then it's going to take way too long to get the Champion's Destiny, because as I found out, the higher tiers require way more materials than the lower tier to get. And you can probably see how this is going to go. Now, I'll give it this. This seems like a permanent update for Dungeon Quest, and if it is, then I don't think it's too bad. But if this is an event, then there can be a problem with the future proofing of this game. Because if they were to make a level 110 dungeon, and this whole update was just an event, then the whole balancing would just be off. Either the 210 dungeon would be insanely hard to beat for Yokai Peak players, or it would be insanely easy for those who got the Champion's Destiny. So you can see what the obvious problem is if this is just an event. However, if it's a permanent thing, I don't really mind it too much, because it's basically like a more interesting way of getting ultimates. And either way, I do think the legendaries should have been ultimates, because they're basically like 1 dungeon apart from the highest weapon you can get at those level requirements. Because take for example the Champion's Judgment, the power is around 44 million, and you can unlock that at level 160 if you have the time to get all the materials, that is. However, 44 million is the Northern Lands insane level of power. It sort of creeps into Nightmare because some weapons can go that low, but overall, it's basically a Northern Lands weapon in level 160, and this makes these dungeons way easier to grind, if not way too cheesy. And yeah, I would say maybe at least maybe they should increase the level requirement, because I would disagree with lowering the amount of power you need to use it, because otherwise that's going to demotivate a lot of people playing this update. So if Voldex does nerf the gear for whatever reason, I would recommend just increasing the level requirements rather than just lowering the power. So yeah, that's basically that. So I guess there isn't really too much more to say. I do think Greg is way too easy to beat, but since he can appear on any dungeon, I'm not quite sure what to think of it. It does give beginner players a way easier chance at beating him, but for us endgame players, it's no challenge at all. And fun fact, actually, I don't know if anybody knows this, but when Greg spawns and then you grab his coin and his armor is removed, you can actually one-cycle him using 2 Hands of Death from Yokai Peak, which is a very interesting thing, because Hands of Death was considered a useless spell, even after all of its buffs. And the reason for that is Hands of Death, from me calculating some DPS and stuff a while back when Yokai Peak was just new, I found out after the buffs it actually has the highest DPS out of any spell in Dungeon Quest. The only problem with it is its area is very small, it's a little buggy, and also because of the long cooldown, it doesn't work with Inner. So that's kind of why it was considered garbage. But in terms of Greg, I think this would be your best spell to use rather than Enhanced Inner Focus as well as Rift Beam. So if you guys are grinding this event, definitely grab some Hands of Death with you. Just make sure you get that first tick when you attack him, because if you miss that, you won't be able to one-cycle Greg. So yeah, for those grinding Greg, just give it a try. Another problem I thought I'd have to bring up, as you could probably consider just as a quality of life change, but I feel like the later dungeons should give more materials because they're harder to beat, obviously. Like, if you beat Desert Temple, you get 1 Warforged Metal, but if you beat the next dungeon on that list, which I believe was Underworld, you still get only 1. And if you beat the other dungeons, like I forgot what they were, but the other 2 dungeons that you could get Warforged Metal on all 4 of those dungeons give the exact same amount of materials. And if you're going to convert materials, regardless of the type of material, you need 2 of one material to convert it into 1 of another material. So you're basically losing a lot of value if you do convert materials. So my recommendation with that is just only convert if you have no other choice to do it, because you're losing a lot of value if you do convert. Now Voldex has tried to incentive people to convert, because they worded it like how all the materials are different rarities. Like, you can convert the lower tiers into higher tiers. However, this is just to try to push you to convert items, because all the materials are basically the same rarity. I will give it this though, the Astral Amethyst, which is the highest level item, or at least the supposedly highest tier item, is probably the hardest to get out of the 4, because to get that material, you have to beat Greg on King's Castle, Ghastly Harbor, Aquatic Temple, or Yokai Peak. And these are not very farmable dungeons, if you ask me. I have played around with these dungeons to try to find the best ones to grind materials on, and here's what I came up so far. So for the Warforged Metal, the best dungeon I found to grind on was Desert Temple. A lot of people are saying Steampunk Sewers is the best dungeon, but I don't really see why, because you can beat Desert Temple a lot quicker than Steampunk Sewers, and as far as I'm aware, Greg can spawn on any minion stage, so I don't really know why people are saying Steampunk is the best. but I would recommend going with Desert Temple on that one. Now for the Obsidian chunk, obviously we have the two dungeons, Winter Outpost and Orbital Outpost. There's a lot of controversy between which one is better, but in my opinion, Winter Outpost I think would be the best because it's way easier to beat than Orbital Outpost, and if you can optimize your strategy around it, you can constantly get under a minute runs. Now at Orbital, I have heard the world record for it is around 9:06 on the timer, but I have still yet to beat it because my record is still 9:02. So I don't really understand how people can do that, but if you can beat Orbital in less than a minute, then you can grind that instead for Obsidian chunks. Because Orbital is actually still the shortest dungeon if you can beat it as quickly as that. Now for the gold bars, I didn't expect this, but I think Gilded Skies is actually the best dungeon for this. If you're not at that level though, you can grind the canals for it. The other two dungeons I don't think are really good for the gold bars, but in my attempt for getting this item, I found Gilded Skies to be the quickest one because most of the time I had Greg spawning on the first stage. But I think I was just really lucky at that because I have gotten him past the second boss once, or not once, but a few times. So yeah, you can give it a try I guess, but I would say go with Gilded Skies if you're in Yokai Peak. Now the Astro Amethyst, I don't really know the best dungeon for this, but from my experience, I would say go with either Yokai Peak or Ghastly Harbor, because for some odd reason, I could not get Greg to spawn at all, either in King's Castle or Aquatic Temple. I just could not find him for the life of me. Now for Ghastly Harbor, the spawning is a little weird for Greg because I only got him to spawn after the second boss. And for Yokai Peak, although I know he can spawn on any mini stage, I only got him before the second boss. So there's a lot of weird spawning quirks, but I do think he can spawn on any minion stage, and I was just really unlucky. But you guys are going to need to correct me on that if I'm wrong. So if you guys are going to grind this dungeon, I will leave a summary in the description for what dungeons you should grind. And also I will leave some tips in there. So I guess that's all I have to cover with this update. Not as exciting as maybe everyone thinks it is, but there's a new weapon that us end players have to grind, but considering all the problems I have with this event and maybe some of the balancing, I would probably have to give this whole update a 5. It's not a particularly exciting one, admittedly. I would have preferred we got it in a new dungeon instead of having this whole thing for us end players to grind. Because this whole update is basically just a different version of an ultimate from what BKappy did with Northern Lands. Now, I'll give it this, Northern Lands 1 is more interesting because we got a harder boss. And it was a lot harder to get the ultimates, and I think BKappy admitted that it was just a placeholder just to buy him more time to get Gilded Skies out. But either way, I still think the Odin Reincarnation is overall a better update than this whole Greg system. Now, it wouldn't piss me off so much if the Legendary was an ultimate weapon, and I think it should still be considered an ultimate weapon. Like, why are the ultimate weapons we have still only the Northern Lands one? What happened to the Gilded Skies one? And why don't we have another one if Full-X is just going to increase the time to develop a new dungeon for us endgame players? So I don't really know what the future days will come. I have heard rumors of a new dungeon coming soon, but from the roadmap, I still think that's going to be the level 130 dungeon. So for us Yokai Peak players, I think we'll still have to wait for some time before we get a new dungeon we can grind. So I think that's going to end it for this video. Just giving you guys my opinion on this whole update and whatnot. And overall, I think it's just okay. So So I'm going to wrap it here. If you guys like this video, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more Dungeon Quest and Animal Crossing content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.